if he does attack NATO, we need to be ready to stand ready to be in a war-fighting mode. That's why the Defence Review moves us into a war-fighting readiness mode.
And the Strategic Defence Review is finally unveiled today with its range of recommendations on everything from our nuclear weapons to the size of the armed forces to the use of cyber warfare. The Defence Secretary, John Healey, said last week there was, quote, no doubt the country will spend 3% of GDP by 2034 to pay for the recommendations in the review. But when we spoke to Healey yesterday on Times Radio, he wouldn't repeat that there would be no doubt. So no doubt now seems to have become an ambition. Let's talk to Labour's Armed Forces Minister, Luke Pollard. Good morning.
Good morning.
The Defence Secretary has said that this review will send a message to Moscow. What is that message?
Well, the Strategic Defence Review that we're publishing today is the biggest transformation of our armed forces in 100 years. It seeks to learn the lessons from the war in Ukraine, refresh our capabilities, invest in our people, and underscore that increased defence spending up to 2.5% of our GDP by April 2027 is an engine for growth. It helps create jobs in every part of our nation. That's what will be outlined when the Defence Secretary makes the announcement to the Commons later today. But it's an opportunity for us as a country to stand tall in the NATO alliance as the leading European member of NATO, committing our forces to the security of not just the United Kingdom, but those of our allies as well.
So what message are we sending to Moscow with this review?
Well, what we're seeking to do here is to complicate the calculus for President Putin. We know that he's attacking our friends in Ukraine at the moment. We know that he is seeking to attack and undermine our NATO allies, especially those on the eastern flank. And by investing in new capabilities, by investing in our people, what we seek to do is to create added deterrence. That means making it harder for Putin to commit his forces into battle against NATO to preserve the peace. But if he does attack NATO, we need to be ready to stand ready to be in a war-fighting mode. That's why the Defence Review moves us into a war-fighting readiness mode. But it also means that we need to be ready to defeat that aggression if necessary. But the key point about this Defence Review is it increases our deterrence, increases the ability for the UK to stay safe and protect not only ourselves but our allies, especially those countries, NATO members that border Russia.
So is the UK going to be spending 3% of GDP on defence? Is that now a guarantee?
Well, we've set out that we are spending 2.5% by April 2027, with the ambition to spend 3% in the next Parliament when economic conditions allow. I agree with the Defence Secretary that thanks to the Chancellor getting our economy back on track by having the highest growth in the G7, that I have no doubt, just as the Defence Secretary doesn't, that with the growing threats that we're facing, that we will be spending 3% in the next Parliament.
But you can't
today
guarantee
it's about what we're spending it on.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I'm focusing in on that number, and I know that you won't be able to talk about the details in this Defence Review until it's published. If you can't guarantee that we will spend 3%, how can you guarantee anything in this review?
Well, we have certainly clear that we're spending 2.5% by April 2027. And the Prime Minister, the Defence Secretary and the whole government is clear that we aim to spend 3% in the next Parliament when economic conditions allow. But as I've just set out, with growth being the highest in the G7, with our economy getting back on track thanks to the decisions taken by the Chancellor, I have no doubt that that is what we will be spending. And that is why the Defence Review that we're publishing today not only invests in our armed forces, restoring defence spending to 2.5%, a figure not met in any of the last 14 years.
I think that lots of people listening to you would think that the government has gone some way to increasing spending on defence. And there's a whole other debate about whether the money's spent well and the compromises when you spend money on defence, whether it has to come from other places. But you've just said to me that the UK will be the leading force in NATO. We are not spending anywhere near as much as some of the other countries in NATO. And you can't guarantee that we'll even get to 3% today.
Well, I've got no doubt that we'll get to 3% in the next Parliament, as I've said a number of times.
Well,
now.
you also said it wasn't guaranteed. And actually, really, you're still fighting it out with the Treasury. You haven't been able to secure a guarantee from Rachel Reeves for that 3%. That's the truth, isn't it?
Now, forgive me, Kate, I didn't say those words. I said that I have no doubt that we'll be spending 3% in the next Parliament. And
you said it's an ambition where the situation allows.
Indeed, I think we're going round in circles, though, but we will be spending, I think, 3% in the next Parliament. We're spending 2.5% by April 2027, an additional £5 billion in the defence budget this year. By moving that budget from international development, taking that difficult decision into defence, we're injecting it into British industry, creating the jobs that we need. And if you look at the announcement today about building up to 12 new nuclear attack submarines in Barrow with reactors built in Derby, that not only creates 30,000 jobs, it doubles the number of apprenticeships and graduates that will be employed in that, providing opportunities for our young people.
Why?
And motors the supply chain nationwide.
Why are you saying up to 12 new? Why not just say 12? Why is there any uncertainty with that number?
Well, the plan, as recommended by George Robertson in the Defence Review, is up to 12 new nuclear attack submarines. We currently have around 7 at the moment, the Astute-class boats. And having been to Barrow to see the amazing workers in the Barrow shipyard building the Astute-class boats and the new Dreadnought submarines that will carry Britain's independent nuclear deterrent that we're also further investing in with the Defence Review today, I know that they've got the ability to do this, but the Defence Review
but
also
they don't.
sets
But
out...
Luke Pollard, forgive me, I don't. You say we're going round in circles. We're not going round in circles. The government can't guarantee 12. You have to say up to 12 because you haven't got the money in place. That's the truth, isn't it?
No, we're saying up to 12 because as part of the work to get up to 12, we're increasing the speed of the build. So roughly at the moment, it takes around 3 years to build one of these hunter-killer submarines, the Astute-class boats that Barrow produce. They're incredible pieces of kit and equipment. But to get to our ambition of having up to 12 nuclear submarines, the new AUKUS submarines that we're developing with our American and Australian allies, we need to halve that production date. So instead of having a new submarine every 3 years, we aim to build one in every 18 months. Now, that's a huge increase in productivity. That is why we're investing not just in the Barrow shipyard, but in the supply chain that supplies the critical components that allows us to build submarines faster to make sure that we've got the cutting-edge military gear that keeps our country safe.
Have the showers been fixed on board HMS Queen Elizabeth yet? It was over 170 days, no hot showers, 600 personnel on board. Have those showers now been fixed?
I don't know. I'm happy looking into that and getting back to you. But I do know that HMS Prince of Wales, our second carrier, is doing a superb job in her mission to sail to the Indo-Pacific. There'll be further details on her mission announced in due course. But we have incredible capabilities across our Royal Navy. But look, we need to invest in our Royal Navy. We inherited a situation where we hadn't seen under the last government the investment in our forces, certainly not the investment in our people. That's why we've given our armed forces the second above inflation pay rise since coming to office. That's why only a few days ago we announced £1.5 billion to invest in defence housing to deal with the utter scandal of our armed forces and their families living in really shoddy accommodation. That is a government that is investing in our people and investing in our national security. And that is what you'll hear more of today when the Defence Secretary makes his statement to the Commons this afternoon.
I suppose this is part of a bigger question, though, for the government, isn't it? It's about promises versus reality. I have to ask you this question because we've been talking about the government saying it would stop the boats. We're seeing record crossings of illegal migrants across the Channel. You know, you are talking here today about promises. You made a promise to stop those crossings. You haven't been able to do that. Is it time for the Navy now to step in to defend the UK's border and help prevent people from crossing the Channel in this manner?
No, we know that in good weather when there's low wind and the sea state's low, that's a boost for criminal gangs. But we also know that the new anti-terror legislation is going through Parliament. That's the powers that will be using terrorism-style powers against the criminal gangs. We also know that the agreement that we've signed with France that will enable France to pick up people out of the water.
Well, unfortunately, Luke Pollard, I have to stop you there. We are running out of time, but you mentioned it's £500 million we've spent on that deal with France. We're actually getting a worse result. They've intercepted less boats than this time last year, despite that amount of money.
Well, as I was trying to say, the agreement with France is being activated shortly. That will enable France to be able to pluck people out of the water, something they currently don't do. Now, we know there's more work to be done here, but the investment that we're putting into this is reflective of the determination that the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary have in particular to smash the gangs, but equally to remove people who have no right to be here. We've removed over 30,000 people with no right to be in Britain in the last year. That's an increase compared to the last government, but we know there's much more to do here.
Will you hold out on a fishing deal with France until they step up?
Well, the fishing deal with the European Union was part of the European UK reset deal that was announced by the Prime Minister recently. And certainly as someone who represents the fishing community, removing the red tape that was introduced by the Brexit deal, that's made it so hard for our fishers to export to our key market in the European Union, with a new SPS agreement, removal of that red tape and some of the queues at the border. Well, that's good news for our fishing industry.
So that
I
happens
expect further work to support our fishing industry in due course.
Luke Pollard, many thanks for your time on the programme this morning.
Thank you.
That's Labour's Armed Forces Minister there, Luke Pollard.
He called it the biggest transformation of the British Armed Forces in 100 years. He said he has no doubt that we will get to 3% of GDP by the next Parliament. But despite having no doubt, wouldn't make a guarantee, which is an interesting position, because if you have no doubt, then you can guarantee it, can't you? And this is not just a semantic media question. The question is, has the Treasury made enough money available for the military to do this? And as a country, do we want the Treasury to fund this stuff? Because it's billions and billions of pounds that we won't be able to spend on other things, isn't it?
I think it's also about, the Defence Secretary and the Prime Minister today will talk about the UK being a leading force in NATO. And while that may well be the intention, if you cannot guarantee that you will be able to spend 3% of your GDP, and if there are other countries like Poland where they are stepping up, a projected rise there of 4.7%, for example, by 2025. There are other countries spending far more. It's very difficult to credibly say that. And I think there needs to be some investigation into some of these. For example, up to 12 new-powered attack submarines. We heard from Dom, these are not new figures. We knew that we were aiming to spend this amount of money on new submarines. We still don't have a firm number because we're saying up to 12, not a full guarantee of 12. And I think that there is a bit of a question here about whether the Treasury is confident, is happy to hand over this amount of money. And the reason partly for asking that question is because if you say yes to spending 3% of GDP, the cost of it, I think it's something like £17 billion, the Institute for Fiscal Studies calculated. That's a huge amount of money, and it has to come from somewhere. It either comes from taxes or it comes from cuts. And we know that there are already huge cuts which some government departments are facing, and more would make life even more difficult.
And people, you have to let you know what you make of this, because John Healey's going to say today about the immediate and pressing danger posed by Russia. Do you actually believe that? Do we actually believe that? Because Poland is next to Russia, so that's why it spends so much. A lot of the Baltic states that spend the money do so because they're close to Russia. Do we really believe we are on a war footing? That's what you're going to hear a lot today. We've already had some doubts cast upon that this morning. Are you happy to be on a war footing? Because it leads to money going from pot A to pot B. That's what this always amounts to.